let's talk about what's been happening in Conservative Canada. A terrorist is given Canadian citizenship under the Trudeau government's watch. Trudeau is accused of doing an about-face on the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. Premier Legault freezes Quebec's intake of temporary foreign workers. Doug Ford's Ontario government will close down 10 drug consumption sites near schools and childcare centres. The question is being asked, how did a father and son arrested and charged with planning a violent terrorist attack get into Canada in the first place?
The RCMP made public the allegations the pair, 26-year-old Mustafa and 62-year-old Ahmed El-Didi, were poised to launch a terror attack in Toronto inspired by listed terrorist group ISIS, armed with an axe and a machete.
The father has even been given Canadian citizenship. Conservatives want to know why.
An ISIS video released in 2015 is believed to show 62-year-old Ahmed Fouad Mustafa El-Didi dismembering a prisoner with a sword. El-Didi was still approved for Canadian citizenship after the video was released.
While this duo thankfully no longer poses a threat to Canadians, Conservative MPs still demand answers.
Are there threats remaining out in the country right now, produced by the same systemic failures that allowed for El-Didi to not only enter the country, but also to obtain citizenship? Canadians deserve answers to these questions.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he would dedicate more resources to security screening in the immigration and citizenship system.
Justin Trudeau spends our resources trying to ban plastic straws and hunting rifles, while he opens our borders up to potential terrorists and other security risks.
Liberal Immigration Minister Mark Miller has this to say.
I'm also going to take the next step, which is to start the preliminary work with the evidence at hand to look at whether the individual in question's citizenship should be revoked.
This raises the eyebrows of Canadians who remember when Trudeau clearly stated he doesn't think terrorists should have their citizenship revoked. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper has argued with Trudeau about this in the past.
Immigrants, Canadians, all of us who are here expect that we would have a minimum bar, that people would not, people who come here would not be guilty of trying to plan terrorist attacks against this country.
A Canadian is a Canadian.
In 2015, the Harper Government revoked the citizenship of Zakaria Amara, the Toronto 18 ringleader who plotted to bomb downtown Toronto. Then, one of the first things the Liberal did when Trudeau became Prime Minister was change the law so terrorists could keep their Canadian citizenship.
A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and it is for that reason that it will no longer be possible under this law to revoke citizenship of any Canadian for crimes of the kind that were in the previous law.
The Liberals went so far as to give back citizenship to Zakaria Amara.
Zakaria Amara is going to get his citizenship back because of the Liberal government. Their first piece of legislation in here. So when we talk about principle, I mean, there's a strong statement of principle in that action too, and that's what we take an issue with as a party.
The House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security will be studying the case and questioning government officials. Prime Minister Trudeau is being accused of an about-face over Canada's Temporary Foreign Workers Program, following a scathing report.
A bombshell report by the United Nations has slammed Canada for being a breeding ground for modern-day slavery. The report says Canada's Temporary Foreign Worker Program favors employers and locks migrants into debt bondage.
You see, back in 2015, Trudeau had this to say about the Temporary Foreign Workers Program.
The government has allowed the Temporary Foreign Workers Program to become a force that drives down wages across the country and takes advantage of vulnerable people from abroad.
After becoming Prime Minister, Trudeau ramped up the program.
Historically used to support Canada's agricultural sector, the influx of temporary workers skyrocketed in recent years, from 84,000 in 2018 to roughly 150,000 last year.
The UN Special Rapporteur Tomoya Obokata explains his findings after his fact-finding mission to Canada.
Conditions are, for example, excessive working hours, no overtime pay or less than minimum wage, no access to health and social care, excessive surveillance, and sometimes physical and sexual violence.
The same Liberal government that prioritized giving a convicted terrorist back his citizenship is failing to protect temporary foreign workers who aren't given the opportunity to become citizens.
The UN report notes TFWs are unable to leave their employers, unable to access public services, and deported at the employer's discretion. Canada used to bring in more people as permanent residents with the long-term goal of making them full citizens.
Temporary foreign workers are particularly vulnerable because they face deportation if they lose or leave their job that brought them into Canada.
It is permanent resident status that is the linchpin that will give access to workers to the same rights that other workers have in Canada. I think it's a very damning report.
The sheer number of temporary workers also means it's harder for Canadians to find jobs. This is what Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has to say.
Look, Trudeau's destroyed our entire immigration system, and he has expanded the temporary foreign worker program by well over 200% at a time when we're losing jobs. When I was responsible for that program in 2015, we had only 60,000 temporary foreign workers. Now it's close to 200,000, and on top of that, you have international students who are effectively temporary foreign workers, came under the wrong stream. Our temporary foreign worker program should only be available to fill jobs that employers have proven beyond a doubt cannot be filled by Canadians.
Poilievre has also noted that the Liberal government has used tax dollars to fund positions of temporary foreign workers.
Now we learn that the $15 billion grant to the Stellantis plant will fund mostly jobs for non-Canadians, not immigrants. We love jobs for immigrants. Jobs for people who are not Canadian citizens and will not be Canadian citizens. They will come here, get a taxpayer-funded paycheck, and take it back to their country. This is a $15 billion grant to one company. $15 billion works out to $1,000 for every single Canadian family. You got 15 million families in Canada. You got $15 billion for this one company. Every family in Canada will give $1,000 to this plant. And now we know that the majority of the jobs won't even go to Canadians.
We know of at least one Liberal MP who is himself hiring temporary foreign workers.
Suk Dhaliwal, Liberal MP. He got a temporary foreign worker to do legal assistance work. You couldn't find a legal assistant in Surrey for your land surveying company?
In Quebec, Premier François Legault is taking action by announcing a 6-month freeze on the intake of low-wage temporary foreign workers.
With this, Premier François Legault wants to send a message to Ottawa that Quebec is doing everything it can to reduce the number of temporary immigrants it has jurisdiction over. And now it's the federal government's turn.
The unemployment rate in Canada is currently 6.4%. The youth unemployment rate sits at 14.2%. It was 10.2% a couple years ago. Youth are disproportionately affected when low-wage or entry-level jobs for Canadians are scarce. While Canadians are left wondering how well the Trudeau government is handling citizenship and immigration, we learn the same department is trying to censor speeches from Conservative MPs. At a citizenship ceremony in his own riding, Alberta Conservative MP Garnet Jennis revealed that government bureaucrats demanded to see a copy of his speech beforehand.
It has long been common for members of Parliament to have this opportunity to come and welcome new citizens at citizenship ceremonies like this. But today I was asked for the first time to submit remarks in advance, which would be reviewed by the Immigration Department. And I was disappointed by that because I don't think citizenship ceremony censorship is something of elected officials that should happen by the executive branch.
MP Jennis went on to say he would speak from the heart instead. He welcomed the new citizens and encouraged them to claim their freedom and use it for the common good. In Ontario, Doug Ford's government is banning drug consumption sites near schools and childcare centres, closing down 10 sites across the province, including 5 in Toronto.
We will ban drug consumption sites within 200 meters of schools and childcare centres.
Ontario Health Minister Sylvia Jones also announced $378 million to establish 19 new homelessness or addiction recovery hubs, or HART hubs.
Bringing those agencies and communities, those experts together to make sure they can form the hubs and have that service into treatment, into recovery, is where we are focused.
These hubs with wraparound services are similar to what Premier Danielle Smith's UCP government has successfully implemented in Alberta.
Building on the success of Edmonton's Navigation Centre that opened in January this year, now the Alberta government has announced Calgary's very own support centre for the vulnerable.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says a Conservative government under his leadership would not fund drug consumption sites. Instead, tax dollars would go to treatment options.
I'm against the drug dens next to children's playgrounds, schools, other places where people who are vulnerable in the community live. We will defund them. There will not be a single taxpayer dollar from the Poilievre government going to drug dens. Every single penny will go to treatment and recovery services to bring our loved ones home drug-free. Thank you.
The Ontario Ford government also plans to pass legislation banning city councils from participating in the federal government's so-called safer supply programs. And that's it for this week. Be sure to like and subscribe and sign up for our free email updates. Stay in the know with what's happening in Conservative Canada. Thanks for watching.